In the heart of the dense forest, a small haven surrounded by towering whispers stood a clearing. Here, three friends, Jake, Mike, and Alex, tent pitched there, escaping from the societal chaos, unaware of the darkened shadows lurking at night. As the sun did fallen below the horizon, the sky obtaining hues of crimson and orange, the murmurings of the forest seemed eerily live. Jake, having adventure in his soul, laughed at their fears, while Mike frequently glanced over shoulder at every leaf's rustle. Alex, the skeptic one, did brush off their fear as paranoia. Night fell, covering the forest in a darkness quilt. Around the fires that crackled, they shared tales of their childhood adventures, trying essentially to suppress the ominous echoing sounds through the trees. Yet, as the flames of fire did dwindle, their bravado too, and an ear-numbing silence took over the clearing. A howl from a distant shattered the stillness, creating a shiver party down their spines. Trying for lightening the mood with a joke, Jake laughed, which fell flat as he saw something moving in the shadows. It was merely a fleeting glimpse, but was enough to make their spines ice cold. With hands that shook significantly, they zipped up the tent, seeking refuge from the unknown gloominess lurking elsewhere. Inside, the darkness seemed to be pressing against them, making the air thick with fear. Hours passed in piercing silence, broken by Mike's occasional whimpers or Jake's failed attempt at nervous laughter. As they were weighed down by exhaustion, a sudden extraordinary noise interrupted the calmness, a deep growl that seemed to come from below the ground beneath them. Frozen in the clutches of fear, they listened as the growl resonated louder and the sounds of something massive encircled their tent. Its footfall crunched the leaves. Panic seized overcome as the reality of not being alone in the darkness overshadowed them. In desperation, Jake fumbled for a flashlight, casting a weak flickering light in the tent. The sight of the shadows dancing on the canvas sent paralyzing waves of terror coursing through them, distorted and grotesque like a lurking monster from a nightmare. Gasping together, they huddled, prayed for dawn's first light to vanish the horrors. The first sun rays pierced the tree canopy above by the time they got out of their tent, visibly shaken but fortunate enough to be alive. The forest, silent once again, as if the terrors of the night were part of another reality. But the memory of that dreaded night remained etched in their minds, reminding of the lurking darkness within the shadows, waiting to feast on those foolhardy enough to intrude the forest alone. The jungle wave sung a lullaby, and the beast fed on daylight. Silent they were, these woods, of heavy silence, only felt before the dusk settles in. Me and Mark, we talked up this camping trip, making promises we probably couldn't keep. We were now standing here in the vast wilderness of a national park, and nature was being a bit intense for us. Camp was up near a stream, our fire making popping sounds, giving us some form of comfort. Mark, always filled with hope, was already sharing laughs and relaxing with a beer. For me, though, I had the sense of being sick-sighted by eyes I could not see. There were no sounds as such, but there's something crawling on the back of my neck. "Everything okay with you?" Mark tries to figure out my disposition. "Just admiring the scenery," that's all I could utter with a forced grin. But the scenic reality was beginning to scare me a tad more than expected. The trees, all twisted in eeriness, their branches reaching out, became scarier as light started to fade. As night set in, silence that can be deafening increased its intensity. The pop of a twig or the rustle of dried leaves were the only sounds that dared to intervene. Huddling near the fire the flickering shadows from the fire danced on the surrounding trees, and Mark, God bless his naive soul, already entered the land of dreams. I was laying wide awake, every rustling sound a potential danger. Then there it was, a growl, so deep you would think it's coming from the core of the earth. Neither bear nor wolf is capable of this sound. There was a certain terrifying intellect in that sound, accompanied by an instinctive craving. Mark rumbled next to me in his sleep. My heart was racing with fear. "Did you heard that?" In a whisper filled with urgency, I asked. Mark, waking up from his sleep, was perplexed. "Heard what?" He was confused, and the growl, now closer than before, sent chills down our spines. Mark was finally out of his slumber. Flashlight and a worn-out hunting knife that I found in the car were our last resort. The forest floor was a puzzle of darkness, Trees stood silent like guards on duty. We ran the flashlight all around, slicing through the darkness, but revealed nothing. The growl still continued, and it felt like it was toying with us. A panic was starting to consume me. We were lost, and we knew we were no match for what we couldn't see. And then a shriek that could curdle your blood echoed through the night. It didn't come from Mark. It was such a piercing, beastly shriek it made me nauseous. Terror pushed me to move. I still needed to find Mark. Struggling through the vegetation with the weak support of a flashlight in this endless wilderness, I heard the shriek again, now closer, followed by a sickening thud. I found Mark laying at the foot of a tree, his face etched with a silent scream. No injuries, no blood, but his eyes. They mirrored abject terror. Suddenly, I was on my knees, a sob itching to come out. The growl came around again right behind me. Slowly I turned around, shining the flashlight into the dark, but to reveal nothing. Whatever it was now was closer, waiting, and I realized in that suffocating silence I would never be leaving this mountain alive. The campfire is sputtering and popping. It casts shadows that dance on our tent's canvas walls. Sarah, she's already snuggled up, but sleep? It's not coming to me right now. We're on this week-long backpacking trip, miles and miles further into the wilderness than I've ever gone. The brochure referred to it as secluded tranquility, but tonight the tranquility feels heavy, supersaturated with a silence that feels quite unsettling. Believe me, there are frogs in the desert. Earlier, when we was out on the trail, came across an old campsite that had been abandoned by, it was a cluttered mess of rusted gear and torn pieces of tent all over. A single dented mess kit catching the dying sunlight. Gives you the heebie-jeebies, a feeling of unease like something's up. Sarah moves next to me. "Can't sleep go to?" she murmurs, her voice groggy from sleepiness. "Only thinking," I replied, aiming for a casual tone. I didn't wish to stress her out, 'cause the outside silence was oppressive, only getting broken by the occasional spooky hoot of an owl now and then. Suddenly, a bang shatters the quiet. That rhythmic tap, tap, tappity tap, like some heavy branch scraping against the tent's side. My heart does a little jump. Sarah sits straight up, the fear in her eyes mirroring my own. We both held our breath, leaning to listen. The tapping paused. Relief washed over. I mean, it felt like a big old wave hitting me right in the chest. Maybe it was just a branch, my mind kept repeating, trying my level best to make it sound believable. But then, the sound makes a comeback, far too close this time, and joined by a low, beastly sound that chilled me straight to the bone. Panic chews at my wits. Reaching out, I grabbed hold of the flashlight, its light pathetically weak against the sprawling darkness outside, a strange tomato in a fruit salad. Sarah, she scrambled around for her phone, the frail light from it being our second line of defiance against the scary unknown surrounding us. We huddled up against each other, with both our backs pressed flush against the thin walls of this nylon tent. The relentless tapping continued to drum out our terror against the slight shelter of the tent. The beastly sound from earlier began to creep closer, evolving into a low, stomach-hungry growl that seemed to shake the very ground. Terror choked out any sense I had left. We were stuck, trapped like helpless prey in a silent, deadly game of tag. Now the tent began to give under some invisible claws tearing into our only defense against whatever lurked out there.